it's such a care model I resonate with. We're doing it what I perceive to be like the right way, the slow way, the behavior change way, the meeting you where you're at way, the not trying to cookie cutter everything out for you, but really understanding you and your history to create that long-term change. And again, every stage of life is so different. And to know that you have people to lean back on that are along there with you is really, really nice.
Where does something like Eternal fit in?
Into this overall step-by-step process? Yeah. We walk with you through it. And I think that is
and what is Eternal?
Yes. Eternal, how I like to describe it, is the marriage between a human performance team and your medical team. And if you've been on a really good human performance team, medical is always a part of that, and you know that. But it's just not traditional that people think about things like that in that way. But when we know that inactivity and things like this are so robust in long-term disease risk, it should all kind of be married in that same vein, or at least knowing and having an awareness of experts to refer to. So it really is that team. And within Eternal, there's 3 different kind of product offerings to meet you where you're at within that particular journey. So the baseline and most simplistic, if you was, although I would argue not wildly simplistic, is the Foundations offering, which is our blood biomarker married with evaluation from NP, a nurse practitioner, as well as a performance dietitian, are looking at your labs, figuring out what your intake looks like, and then saying, here's what we see with regard to where your nutrient needs are based off of all this information.
Connects with Strava. So you
connects with Strava. Level. Yep. So we have an idea of training volume. Maybe we see you haven't taken a deload ever. And we can understand that when we ask about stress and sleep and things like, and GI health, all the things that can impact energy availability. And then we also look at, again, strategic supplementation where appropriate, and where third-party tested, and all of those good things come in the supplementation world. So that's the Foundations offering. The next tier up is called Performance, and that's our physical assessment as well as Dexa. So looking at lactate threshold, VO2 max, mobility and stability, power and strength, and Dexa data, all from our assessment. And those centers are in New York and San Francisco. And then we marry that blood information with all of those things. So more context to be provided in how we make our recommendations.
Why would someone care about the performance assessments like that?
From an athlete standpoint, it can help drive training. And that should be the ultimate goal, is where am I at to train more specifically? And after I had kids, my whole goal was to not waste time with my training. I didn't want to be spinning the wheels on what do I need to do? What am I just constantly trying to make it work and not seeing any progress? And that's the nice part about the assessment, is you can see where there's opportunity, and maybe there's multiple spaces for it, and you choose one at a time to work on.
Alex was telling me about when he had his assessment. It was like, well, if you don't fix this hip problem you're having, like imagine when you're 50 or 60, the hip problem that you're going to have.
Yeah. And anybody who follows, I guess anybody in the longevity space is very familiar with Peter Attia's commentary around VO2 max and what that means for your longer term existence, and things like grip strength, because there is good evidence of what that means for injury risk later on. Mobility and stability, I think, is one that's wildly underrated on what injury potential eventually is.
Right, because if you can avoid falling,
yes,
then you avoid the hospital, then you avoid all the negative outcomes that exist when you're a 70-plus-year-old person in a hospital setting.
Totally. And for women, especially when we have already a higher risk of bone density issues and injury risk associated with that, with going through perimenopause and postmenopause transitions, it's humongously important to understand what all those different kind of risk factors are. And I like to think about them as check engine lights. Maybe it's green. Maybe you're good to go. You got no check engine lights. It's like an annual physical that you just got blessed off on. And then maybe we have one where it's things are orange or things are red. And this actually might need to abruptly change how you're training. When I did my assessment, my imbalance with my left leg compared to my right was really stark, where my right leg was so much stronger. And I was I do unilateral strength work. What is happening? And they asked me, which side do I carry my children on?
Huh.
And I said, my right. And they're like, you've been doing that for 5 years. I said, you're right.
Wow.
And I work in this space. And I've worked with strength coaches my entire career and really had not thought about how impactful that was time after time after time, and how much intervention that likely needs to balance things out. So that assessment side of the house can be really, really helpful in dialing in aerobic performance, any goals you have around aerobic performance, but also understanding that power, strength, mobility side of the house, and really meaningful on bone mineral density and understanding lean mass. I think that's been really eye-opening for people, because on the body comp side of the house, people always want to like beat down the door on body fat. That tells me nothing in comparison to what bone mineral density and lean mass tell me, which is a way larger, robust story. And not to say there's not zero to be understand, especially around visceral fat and those risks, but there is so much power in understanding where lean mass is and where bone mineral density is on long-term health and long-term activity.
One more step up the ladder.
Yes. Yep. Third, one tier up from that is called Pro. And that's essentially like concierge medicine meets human performance team. And that's where you have a dedicated physician. That's where you have a dietitian. That's where you have a coach. And that's really that long-term relationship. That's where we're walking you through each step of that process we already talked about. And that we don't overhaul everything at once. That is not at all in behavior change, an understanding of meaningful and sustainable change. So we work with you on that. On how do we understand all these different aspects of your life? How do we find small things that you really want to work on to create that meaningful change in the long run? And really feel like you have a team that understands you as an athlete, but understands your goals of staying active and understands your fears maybe around what it feels like to add in fuel when you've been told to restrict, or when like messaging from the media and diet culture has always been to be smaller,
How do you break through that?
Time and really like building trust. And I think that each person, again, comes with their own story with that, and really understanding where the motivation is, and maybe where more often than not with food, there is usually other underpinnings with things that we've been exposed to in our life. And maybe that was like, I grew up in the 90s and it was Snackwells, low fat, everything. And that colored how I saw food for so long, and how you view yourself and how you view fueling for performance. And to be able to understand, like, we all come with decades worth of experiences, especially as it surrounds food. And some people are like big Italian families and food was always family style. And then now you're having to prepare it on your own. And that feels overwhelming. And like, what do I even do? And can I just can I make it faster or more convenient or whatever it might be? And really trying to meet people where they're at, and not demonizing any of the process, but looking for the opportunities to be had.
It's so funny you mentioned the family component of it. So I come from a Jewish family where it's like, oh, did you eat enough? Like, did you eat enough? Like, my grandma's
you get
like,
another shovel?
You get it. Like,
that was my
have
grandma.
some more brisket. And like, when I talk to my grandma on the phone, she's like, oh, like, making sure I still eat meat and like getting in enough food. And I had this conversation with my buddy Ross, who also grew up in a Jewish family, and he's like, we're just food pushers. And it's just like, and it's like such an interesting dynamic, because like I've been lucky to never have that like fear of eating more or a lack of a desire to eat more. And even still, I've worked with dietitians who have said, I'm not eating enough. And so it's crazy when I'm coming from a context and a history where I don't have that challenge. And nobody's ever told me you need to eat less, or a coach has never said to me you need to be more lean. Actually, that has happened, but it hasn't impacted me. And like rationally, I'm still not doing it. It's crazy.
And it can feel like a lot too. Even just, I think we talk about energy availability and fueling. Oftentimes, it's also unintentional.
Totally.
And to understand that too is like, people are just busy and they're doing things in their lives, which is why we have to understand context is always key on any sort of intervention that we want to try and influence. I was speaking with somebody today who a lot of her historical past of food has been around supporting her children's school life. She's like constantly in the car, running things around and going to sports and all these other events. And it was less focused on like, are my fueling needs being met, but more so is like, is everything else being met in my children's lives? And that's not an uncommon story, I don't think. And so some of it can feel like a reframe on what does it mean to take care of me? What does it mean to feel well fueled? And navigating some of like the hardships that come along with that.
I want to go back to the 3 stages of Eternal real quick and then pivot back. So those 3 options, The price points are $499, $999, and $6,000.
Correct.
So
Yep.
3 very different categories or levels based on what someone is interested in doing. And it's cool to see. I've always thought that like the missing piece of this puzzle is the so what. Like, okay, you have all this information, you have all these biomarkers, you have all this data. So what? It's totally useless if you can't do anything with it. And so this pro model, like I have a few friends who have signed up for it, and I'm thrilled for them, because like imagine having that level of care in your back pocket that you can have access to.
Yeah, and when you've seen it on the pro sport side or even military side, I've seen what it looks like.
Right.
When you have that ability to have that team care and how that translates into the rest of your life and existence, and you wish that for everybody.
Right.
You wish that things looked like that in our traditional care model. And so that was really why I was even interested in joining Eternal in the first place. Is it's such a care model I resonate with, and we're doing it what I perceive to be like the right way, the slow way, the behavior change way, the meeting you where you're at way, the not trying to cookie cutter everything out for you, but really understanding you and your history to create that long-term change. And again, every stage of life is so different, and to know that you have people to lean back on that are along there with you and who care about your family and your friends and whatever competition you have coming up, and who have maybe their own experiences in those strivings as well, is really, really nice. It feels awesome.